The date is December 23, 2025. The location is the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room, a place designed to intimidate. It is a theater of power, where mahogany panels absorb the winter light filtering through tall, bulletproof windows, and American flags stand sentinel in the corners, heavy with gold fringe. The air in the room is stale, smelling of old wood, floor wax, and lies that have aged far too long in the darkness. Usually, when a witness sits at that solitary table in the center of the room, they are nervous, they are small, they are crushed by the weight of the institution. But today, the dynamic is different. Today, the man sitting at the witness table isn't a career bureaucrat worried about his pension, and he isn't a politician worrying about his polling numbers. FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino sits there, motionless. A thick manila folder rests in front of him, the only prop he brought. This is his last briefing. In 8 days, he walks away from Washington for good. He has spent 8 months in the belly of the beast, inside the J. Edgar Hoover building. 8 months is not a long time in a career, but it was long enough. It was long enough to see the rot inside the walls. It was long enough to document the corruption. And most importantly, it was long enough to get the receipts. Across from him, elevated on the dais, sits Senator Adam Schiff. He adjusts his glasses, the light reflecting off the lenses. He looks smug. He looks polished. He looks like a man who believes he has already won the game. And why shouldn't he? Just 11 months ago, in the final chaotic hours of his presidency, Joe Biden signed a preemptive pardon for Adam Schiff. It was a shield against prosecution, a get-out-of-jail-free card that Schiff now wears like armor. He believes he is untouchable. He believes this hearing is just another performative ritual where he can pontificate about democracy and rule of law, while ignoring his own role in dismantling both. But Adam Schiff has miscalculated. He thinks he is looking at a fellow creature of the swamp. He forgets he is staring down a former NYPD officer, a former Secret Service agent who spent years on the Presidential Protection Division. He is staring at a street cop who knows exactly what a guilty man looks like. Bongino opens the folder. The sound of the paper moving is amplified by the microphone, a crisp, dry sound that cuts through the murmuring of the aides and stenographers. Inside are FBI documents declassified only 72 hours ago by FBI Director Kash Patel. These are not redacted summaries. These are the raw files. 302 forms, interview summaries, whistleblower testimonies that have been buried in a secure basement for 8 years. Bongino looks up. His eyes are dead calm. He doesn't smile. He doesn't frown. He just waits. "Senator," Bongino begins, his voice low but carrying to the back of the room without effort. "You said you saw the evidence. I've spent 8 months at the FBI looking for it." He pauses. He lets the silence hang there, heavy and suffocating. He wants every reporter, every staffer, and every senator to feel the weight of that silence. "Where was it?" Schiff's face flickers. Just for a second, the mask slips. His hand moves instinctively toward his water glass, seeking a moment of delay, a prop to hide behind. Then he stops. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that this isn't a briefing. This is a reckoning. Bongino doesn't waste time with the usual Washington formalities. There are no opening pleasantries about the weather, no thanking the committee for their valuable time, no feigned respect for a process that has been weaponized against the American people. The Washington playbook is burning, and Bongino is holding the match. "Senators, this briefing is about FBI accountability," Bongino says, his voice carrying the flat, undeniable authority of 20 years in law enforcement. Specifically, accountability for those who weaponize the FBI against political opponents. He slides a single document across the polished witness table. It isn't thrown, it is placed with precision. It lands in front of committee chairman Mark Warner. The sound of the paper hitting the wood echoes in the silent room like a gunshot. FBI Form 302. Interview Summary. December of 2017. Bongino announces. He picks up his own copy and begins to read aloud. He reads slowly, letting each word sink into the room like a blade finding its mark. Quote, House Intelligence Committee staffer reports Ranking Member Schiff ordered classified leaks to damage President Trump. The room freezes. Even the stenographer's fingers pause over her keyboard, hovering in midair. This is the moment the air leaves the room. This is the accusation that has been whispered in conservative circles for years, shouted on podcasts, and dismissed by the mainstream media as a conspiracy theory. But now, it isn't a theory. It is being read from an official FBI record by the Deputy Director of the Bureau. Senator Schiff shifts in his chair, his posture stiffening. Point of order, he interrupts, his voice pitched slightly higher than usual. This is a transparent political attack designed to... Chairman Warner raises his hand. Senator Schiff, the witness has the floor. Warner's face is stone. He is a Democrat, yes, but he is also a Senate institutionalist. He understands what is happening here. He sees the document in front of him. He sees the FBI seal. He sees the classification markings crossed out and stamped declassified. Even he understands that some lines cannot be uncrossed. You can spin a narrative, but you cannot spin a federal record that says you committed a felony. Bongino continues, as if Schiff hadn't spoken. He doesn't even blink. He pulls another document from the folder. The stack is deep. He is just getting started. September 2017 interview, same whistleblower. Bongino reads, his eyes locking onto Schiff. Quote, Ranking Member Schiff was particularly upset as he believed he would have been appointed as director of the CIA had candidate Hillary Clinton won the election. A Republican senator, perhaps Rubio or Cruz, leans back in his leather chair and lets out a low whistle. It's a sound of realization. The puzzle pieces are clicking into place. This wasn't just about politics. It wasn't just about oversight. This was personal. This was the rage of a man who believed he was owed power, a man who saw his destiny stolen by a brash outsider from Queens, and who decided to burn down the institutions of government to get his revenge. Schiff tries again, his voice rising, trying to regain control of a room he has lost. Mr. Chairman, these are discredited allegations from a disgruntled former employee who was fired for cause. This entire hearing is a... Senator! Bongino's voice cuts through Schiff's protest like a knife through silk. It isn't loud, but it is commanding. It is the voice of a man who has talked down suspects holding hostages. The whistleblower was your appointee, Bongino says, holding up the personnel file. A Democrat, a career intelligence officer. He worked for Democrats on the Intel Committee for 12 years before you drove him out. You didn't fire him for cause, Senator. You fired him because he wouldn't break the law for you. The silence that follows Bongino's rebuttal is absolute. In Washington, the term whistleblower is usually treated with reverence, at least when it serves the narrative of the establishment. When a whistleblower attacked Donald Trump over a phone call to Ukraine, Adam Schiff called him a patriot. He called him a hero. He said his anonymity must be protected at all costs. But now, faced with a whistleblower from his own staff, a man who documented Schiff's own corruption, the senator attempts to smear him as disgruntled. Bongino won't let him. He holds the document up so the cameras, the few allowed in the room, can zoom in on the FBI seal at the top. June 2023 interview. This is the most recent testimony, Bongino says. He looks around the room, making eye contact with every member of the committee. Let me read this slowly, so everyone understands exactly what we are dealing with. The room holds its breath. The air conditioners hum, a low drone underlining the tension. Schiff stated the group would leak classified information which was derogatory to President Donald J. Trump. Bongino pauses. He lets the words hang in the air. Leak classified information. That is a felony. That is a crime that sends ordinary soldiers and analysts to federal prison for years. But he isn't done. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict President Trump. Republican senators lean forward now, their pens hovering over their notepads. Democrats look at their notes, their water glasses, the ceiling, anywhere but at Adam Schiff. The senator from California sits rigid, his jaw clenched so hard the muscles bulge beneath the skin. His knuckles are white as he grips the armrest of his chair. He looks like a man strapped into an electric chair, waiting for the switch. Senator Tom Cotton speaks up, his voice hard and dry. Deputy Director, are you saying that the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee orchestrated leaks of classified information for the specific purpose of manufacturing an indictment against a sitting president? I'm not saying it, Senator, Bongino replies, tapping the document with his index finger. The FBI's own interview records are saying it. A Democratic whistleblower, under oath, told federal agents that Adam Schiff ordered the systematic leaking of classified information, not to inform the public, not for legitimate oversight, but to frame a president. Schiff finds his voice again, but the smooth, confident baritone that charmed MSNBC audiences for years is gone. It sounds thin, reedy. These baseless allegations were investigated, he stammers, and found to be without what? Bongino leans forward, his shoulders hunched slightly, the posture of a predator closing the distance. Without merit? Or without consequences? Because the Justice Department ran out the clock on the statute of limitations. Bongino answers his own question. That's the reality, isn't it? The investigation didn't clear you, Senator. The calendar saved you. The implication is devastating. It rips away the facade of innocence and reveals the machinery of the swamp. It exposes how the Department of Justice, filled with career bureaucrats sympathetic to the resistance, simply sat on the files. They put them in a drawer. They delayed interviews. They filed extensions until the clock ran out, ensuring that Adam Schiff would never face a jury of his peers. Senator Schiff, you've been on television every week for the last 8 years, talking about FBI accountability, transparency, and fighting corruption, Bongino continues. His tone shifts. It becomes measured, almost gentle, which makes it far more dangerous. You've written op-eds, you've given speeches, you built your entire Senate campaign on being the guy who stands up to the abuse of power. He opens the folder wider. There are so many documents. The pile is an inch thick. Let's talk about your accountability. Let's talk about your corruption. Because for 3 years, you told America you'd seen evidence that didn't exist. And when Americans called you a liar, you hid behind the very classified information you were leaking to protect yourself. This is the core of the betrayal. It wasn't just about breaking the law. It was about the hypocrisy. It was about using the secrecy of the Intelligence Committee as a shield for lies. Bongino picks up the September 2017 FBI 302 again. I want to go back to the motive, Senator, because crimes always have a motive. He reads from the document again. Ranking Member Schiff was particularly upset, as he believed he would have been appointed as director of CIA had candidate Hillary Clinton won the election. Bongino looks up. That's it, isn't it? You thought you'd be running the CIA. You thought you would be the one briefing the president, controlling the secrets, directing the agency. Instead, you were stuck as the ranking member on a committee with a Republican chairman. You were supposed to be in the seat of power, and instead, you were watching Donald Trump sit in the Oval Office. That is absurd, Schiff spits out. My actions were driven by a duty to the Constitution. Is that what you call it? Bongino counters instantly. The whistleblower says that after Trump's election, quote, Schiff believed Russia hijacked the election, and the United States was in the middle of a constitutional crisis. Bongino sets the paper down. You didn't just believe Russia interfered. You believed they hijacked the election. You succumbed to noble cause corruption. You believed the country was in such danger that the rules no longer applied to you. You believed that because you were saving democracy, you were allowed to destroy it. You believed, Bongino says, his voice dropping to a whisper that screams across the room, that you had to take down Trump by any means necessary. And if that meant leaking classified intel, fine. If that meant lying to the American people, fine. Because in your mind, Senator, you weren't a criminal. You were a savior. But looking at these files, you were just a guy who didn't get the job he wanted. The phrase constitutional crisis hangs in the air like smoke. It is the ultimate justification for the unjustifiable. Throughout history, the most dangerous men have always claimed they were breaking the law to save the state. Adam Schiff, staring across the table at Dan Bongino, seems to shrink slightly. The moral high ground he has claimed for a decade is crumbling beneath the weight of his own declassified words. Bongino pulls out another FBI document. This one is dog-eared, marked with yellow highlighter. The whistleblower continues, Bongino says, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the senators. Quote, classified information began leaking to the media. The Democratic minority leadership was aware of the leaks, but was under the impression that leaking the information was one way to topple the administration and fix the constitutional crisis. The room erupts. It isn't a polite rumble of disagreement. It is genuine chaos. Republican senators are talking over each other, demanding explanations. Democrats are shouting for order, their faces masks of panic. Chairman Warner bangs his gavel, the sharp crack of wood on wood sounding like pistol shots. Order! We will have order, Warner bellows, but Bongino just stands there. He is calm. He lets the chaos wash over him like a wave breaking against a rock. He has spent 8 months at the FBI preparing for this moment. He has seen the documents. He knows exactly what is coming next. This was just the opening act. When the room finally quiets, settled by the sheer force of Bongino's glare, he speaks again. Senator Schiff, you didn't conduct oversight. You conducted a coup attempt. You used your position as ranking member, and then as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, to systematically leak classified information to the media with one singular goal: remove a sitting president. Schiff shoots up from his chair. I will not sit here and be accused of... Sit down. Bongino's voice cracks like a whip. It is pure command presence, the muscle memory of 20 years facing down criminals, terrorists, and threats to the president. It isn't a request. It is an order. You wanted this hearing, Senator. You've been calling for FBI accountability for years. Well, you are about to get some. So sit down and take it. Schiff slowly sinks back into his chair. He looks smaller somehow. The smug confidence is entirely gone. In its place is fear. Because Adam Schiff knows what is in those files. He has known for 8 years that this day might come. And now, everyone else is about to know too. Bongino smiles, but it isn't a friendly smile. It is the smile of a prosecutor who has just found the murder weapon. Now, let's talk about how you plan to do it. Because it wasn't random. It was a strategy. He holds up the June 2023 interview summary again. The whistleblower describes an all-staff meeting. He says, quote, "In this meeting, Schiff stated the group would leak classified information which was derogatory to President Donald J. Trump. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict President Trump." Senator Cotton leans forward, his brow furrowed. "Deputy Director, let me be clear. Are you saying that the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee orchestrated leaks of classified information for the purpose of manufacturing an indictment against a sitting president?" "I'm not saying it, Senator," Bongino replies, tapping the FBI document. The FBI's own interview records are saying it. A Democratic whistleblower under oath told federal agents that Adam Schiff ordered the systematic leaking of classified information, not to inform the public, not for legitimate oversight, but to indict a president. Schiff finds his voice again, but it has lost its smooth confidence. These baseless allegations were investigated and found to be without what, Senator? Bongino leans forward. Without merit? Or without consequences, because the Justice Department ran out the clock on the statute of limitations? This is the tragedy of the modern American justice system, laid bare in a Senate hearing room. The statute of limitations was designed to protect citizens from being prosecuted for ancient crimes where evidence has degraded. But in the swamp, it has been repurposed. It has become a tool of protection for the elite. Bongino analyzes this for the room. The DOJ sat on these reports for 8 years. They knew what was in them. They knew a congressman was directing leaks. But instead of appointing a special prosecutor, instead of impaneling a grand jury, they filed extensions. They delayed interviews. They let the calendar turn page after page until the crimes expired. That isn't justice, Senator. That is a cover-up. And the only reason we are talking about it today is because I declassified the files before I quit. Schiff attempts to pivot. The investigation revealed significant contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia. The contacts were the issue. Contacts aren't crimes, Bongino snaps. Senator, in my job at the Secret Service, I had contact with foreign nationals every day. Doesn't make me a spy. You said collusion. You said conspiracy. You said treason. Don't try to move the goalposts now. You were trying to manufacture a crime where none existed, and you used the FBI's secrets to do it. Let's talk about your appearances on television, Bongino says, shifting gears. The room feels heavy, the air thick with the realization that a massive fraud has been perpetrated on the public. Bongino pulls out a new document, not an FBI file this time, but a compiled list. It is pages long. Because you didn't just make these claims once or twice, you made a career out of it. Bongino begins to read from the list. March 22, 2017. More than circumstantial evidence. March 23rd. Direct evidence of deception. April 2nd. Evidence a grand jury would want to see. April 23rd. I can't go into specifics, but there is evidence. He flips the page. The sound is loud in the quiet room. July 23rd, 2017. Credible evidence of collusion. September 17th. Damning evidence. December 10th. I've seen ample evidence. The list goes on and on. Bongino reads dates and quotes for nearly 2 minutes straight. The cumulative effect is devastating. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't one mistake. It was a bombardment. It was a systematic psychological operation conducted against the American people. "Senator, that's just year one," Bongino says, looking up. "Should I continue through 2018? Through 2019? Because you didn't stop until the Mueller report came out and made you look like the liar you are." Schiff clasps his hands together. They are trembling slightly. "The evidence of improper contacts was substantial," he murmurs, retreating to his safe harbor of vague terminology. "Improper contacts," Bongino repeats, mocking him. "You said collusion. You said conspiracy. You said treason. You told the American people that their president was a Russian agent. You said you had seen the proof." Bongino pulls out his phone and holds it up. The screen is black, but the threat is clear. "Want me to play the clips? I've got them queued up. Every single lie. Should we watch them together? Should we watch you tell Chuck Todd that you had more than circumstantial evidence, and then watch you refuse to say what it was?" Schiff looks away. He cannot meet Bongino's eyes. "That's what I thought," Bongino says, setting the phone down. "Senator, do you understand what you did to this country? How many Americans believed their president was a Russian agent because you told them you'd seen the proof? You, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee." Bongino's voice drops. It becomes quieter, more personal, and infinitely more dangerous. Families stopped talking. Friends became enemies. The country tore itself apart. My own family. I've got cousins who won't speak to me because of what you said. Because they believed you. They believed that a man in your position wouldn't lie about something that serious. They thought, he sees the classified intel, he must know. This is the true cost of the lie. It isn't just about polling numbers or elections. It is about the social fabric of the nation. Schiff and his allies in the media created a narrative so toxic it poisoned Thanksgiving dinners and workplace friendships for a decade. They weaponized the trust Americans place in their institutions. "But you did lie, didn't you, Senator?" Bongino presses. "You lied to the American people for 3 years. You went on television over 100 times and told them you'd seen evidence that didn't exist. Why?" Schiff tries to respond. "The role of congressional oversight requires—" "Don't give me the civics lesson, Senator," Bongino shouts, his hand slamming onto the table. "I want to know why. Why did you lie?" He doesn't wait for an answer. He knows the answer. The whole room knows the answer. "You lied because the media let you," Bongino says, turning his gaze to the press gallery. "They wanted it to be true. They needed it to be true. So they gave you a platform. CNN, MSNBC, ABC. They didn't ask for the evidence. They didn't ask to see the particulars. They just handed you a microphone and let you poison the country. This is the symbiotic relationship that destroyed the truth." Schiff provided the terrifying headlines, "Russian agent in the White House," and the media provided the airtime. It was a feedback loop of deception. The media could claim they were just reporting what the chairman said, and Schiff could claim he was just raising concerns. But together, they manufactured a reality that was entirely false. And when people asked for specifics, Bongino says, you hid behind classification. Can't go into the particulars. That was your magic phrase. It shut down every question. It made you sound important. It made you sound like you knew secrets the rest of us were too stupid to understand. He leans forward, staring directly into Schiff's soul. But the secrets didn't exist, did they? The only secret was that you were making it all up. Bongino stands up. He has been sitting or pacing for the last hour, but now he moves behind the witness table, creating a new physical dynamic. He gathers the documents regarding the leaks and places them back into the folder with deliberate care. The sound of the papers shuffling is the only noise in the room. He is closing one chapter of the indictment to open another, even darker one. "But I'm not done yet," Bongino announces, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. "Because we haven't even talked about the surveillance. We haven't talked about the FISA abuse, the Carter Page warrants, the Steele dossier, all the things Senator Schiff defended when he knew, absolutely knew, they were lies." He looks directly at Schiff. The senator is wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead, despite the chill in the room. "You ready for round 2, Senator? Because this is where it gets really bad for you." Bongino pulls out a thick, heavy report. The cover bears the dark blue seal of the Department of Justice and the title, "Review of 4 FISA Applications and Other Aspects of the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane Investigation." This is the Horowitz Report, released in December 2019. It is 478 pages of bureaucratic autopsy, dissecting how the FBI died from the inside out. December 2019, Bongino says, holding the report aloft like a weapon. Inspector General Michael Horowitz released this report. "Do you know what it found, Senator?" He doesn't wait for Schiff to answer. He slams the report down on the table. 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA applications used to surveil Carter Page. 17. The Inspector General didn't find one mistake. He didn't find a typo. He found a systematic pattern of misconduct designed to deceive the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Bongino opens the report to a page he has bookmarked with a red tab. "But that's not what you told the American people, is it? In February 2018, you released your own memo, the Schiff Memo. You put the official House Intelligence Committee letterhead on it. You staked your reputation on it." He pulls out a copy of Schiff's memo. It looks flimsy next to the massive IG report. "Want me to read what you said?" Quote, "FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the FISA process, omit material information, or subvert this vital tool to spy on the Trump campaign." Unquote. Bongino sets the memo down next to the IG report. The visual contrast is striking. The lie versus the truth. The Inspector General found that the FBI did exactly those things. Let me count them for you. Bongino holds up his hand and starts ticking off the points on his fingers, his voice rising with each number. 1. The FBI relied on the Steele dossier without verifying it. They used opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign to spy on the opposition party. 2. They knew Christopher Steele was being paid by the DNC. They didn't tell the FISA court. 3. They knew Steele's primary subsource had disavowed the dossier. The guy told the FBI over drinks that it was all bar talk and rumors. They didn't tell the court. 4. They knew Carter Page had been working for the CIA. He was an operational contact helping America catch Russian spies. They didn't tell the court. 5. Bongino says, his hand open wide now. An FBI lawyer named Kevin Klein-Smith doctored an email to make Page look guilty. He committed a felony to keep the spy warrant alive. Bongino pauses, looking around the room at the senators who are now visibly uncomfortable. "I want to stop on that one. Kevin Klein-Smith. He was an FBI lawyer. His job was to protect the civil liberties of Americans. The CIA sent him an email saying, "Carter Page is a source for us." It was exculpatory. It meant Page was a patriot, not a traitor. And what did Kleinsmith do? Bongino pulls out the court documents from Kleinsmith's guilty plea. He edited the email. He inserted the words, "not a source." He changed the meaning to the exact opposite. He framed an innocent man to keep the investigation going. That isn't an error, Senator. That is a crime. Kleinsmith went to prison for it. He turns back to Schiff. And you defended that process. You wrote a memo saying the FBI did nothing wrong. Why? Why would you defend a process that required fabricating evidence to survive? The room is silent. Every eye is on Schiff. I'll tell you why, Bongino answers. Because if you admitted the FISA process was abused, your entire Russia collusion narrative falls apart. If the FBI had to lie to spy on Carter Page, then maybe they were lying about other things. Maybe there was no there from the beginning. Maybe you were the one pushing a hoax. Schiff's voice is strained now, desperate. The IG report also found that the investigation was properly predicated, he croaks. Properly predicated. Bongino laughs, a harsh, bitter sound that scrapes against the mahogany walls. Yeah, it was predicated on George Papadopoulos getting drunk in a London bar and maybe saying something to an Australian diplomat. That's it. That is your rock-solid evidence for investigating a presidential campaign. He leans over the table, his face hard. Senator, you told America that the FISA warrants were the gold standard. You called anyone who questioned them a conspiracy theorist. You called me a conspiracy theorist. But here we are. The Inspector General says I was right, and you were wrong. 17 times over. Bongino takes a breath. The air in the room feels thin, charged with the electricity of a storm that is finally breaking. He moves to the last section of his table, where a single thin file folder lies isolated from the rest. We've talked about the big picture, Bongino says, his voice lowering. We've talked about the FISA abuse, the false narratives, the media complicity. But I want to talk about one specific leak, because this one tells us everything we need to know about how you operated. He opens the file. Inside is a single sheet of paper, an NSA memorandum. April 11th, 2017. The House Intelligence Committee received a highly classified memorandum from the National Security Agency. This wasn't a summary. This was raw signals intelligence. It detailed collection methods, sources, and targets. It was the kind of information that, if disclosed, could get our agents in the field killed. It was stamped top secret, Chatus comment, no foreign. He looks up at Schiff. Senator, exactly 4 people on your committee had access to that memo. 4. You, Representative Eric Swalwell, your staff director, and 1 other cleared staffer who acted as the courier. That's it. He holds up 4 fingers. 4 people. Keep that number in your head. April 14th, 2017. Bongino continues. 3 days later. The Washington Post runs a story by Ellen Nakashima. The story contains details from that NSA memo, almost word for word, not paraphrased, not summarized, direct quotes from a document that only 4 people on Earth, outside of the NSA, had seen. Senator Cotton interrupts again, his mind working through the logic. Deputy Director, just so I understand, are you saying the leak was so precise that it could only have come from someone who had the actual document in front of them? That is exactly what I'm saying, Senator, Bongino replies. The FBI leak investigation concluded that whoever spoke to the Post either had a photographic memory or was reading directly from the classified memo while on the phone? And only 4 people had access? Cotton asks. Correct. So one of those 4 people leaked. That is the inescapable conclusion. It is, Bongino agrees. He pulls out more documents from the file, phone records and interview transcripts. The FBI interviewed all 4 individuals under oath. Want to know what they found? He doesn't wait. The momentum is unstoppable now. The junior staffer, the courier, had an ironclad alibi. She was out of town. She logged out of the SCIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, at 3:00 p.m. on April 11th and flew to a wedding in Ohio. She didn't return until April 17th. She couldn't have made the leak. He sets that interview summary aside. Eric Swalwell, Bongino says, and a few senators chuckle darkly. His phone records show no calls to the Washington Post during that 3-day window. But the whistleblower we've been discussing says Swalwell had a reputation for leaking. Quote, I had been warned to be careful because he had a reputation for leaking classified information. But in this specific instance, the records clear him. Bongino pauses. The tension is ratcheting up. And then there's you, Senator Schiff. Your phone records show no direct calls to Ellen Nakashima. No calls at all. Schiff relaxes slightly in his chair. He thinks he has survived. He thinks the tradecraft held up. But that's interesting, isn't it? Bongino says, and the trap snaps shut. Because the whistleblower told the FBI something very specific about how leaks worked on your committee. Bongino reads from the 302 again. Quote, under the system established, notes would be run up to Ranking Member Adam Schiff, after which a decision was made as to who would leak the information. He looks up, his eyes boring into Schiff. You didn't make the calls yourself, Senator. You were too smart for that. You were the quarterback. You called the plays, but you didn't throw the ball. You had your staff do it, and you had them use their family members' phones to hide the trail. Bongino holds up a grid of phone records. It is color-coded. Here is what the FBI found. April 13th, 2017. One day before the story runs. A phone registered to the wife of your staff director makes a call to Ellen Nakashima at the Washington Post. The call lasts 28 minutes. This is the same staff director who called Nakashima from his own government phone earlier that day for 2 minutes. Bongino explains. Why would someone do that? Why call the same reporter twice from 2 different phones? Schiff says nothing. His face is pale, drained of blood. I'll tell you why, Bongino says, answering for him. The first call, from the government phone, was to set it up. Call me on the other line. The second call, from the wife's phone, was to actually pass the classified information. That way, if anyone looked at the congressional phone logs, they'd see nothing suspicious. But the actual leak happened on a burner, a phone that couldn't be traced back to your committee. Until now. Senator Marsha Blackburn speaks up, her voice sharp. Deputy Director, are you saying this was a systematic method for leaking using family members' phones? Yes, Senator, Bongino confirms. The FBI found multiple instances of Intel committee staff using phones registered to spouses, parents, and even adult children to communicate with reporters. This wasn't accidental. This was a system, a method to evade oversight. He turns back to Schiff. And it all led back to you. The whistleblower was clear. You decided what got leaked. You decided who would do the leaking. You were the architect of the operation. Bongino lowers his voice. The word for that, Senator, is espionage. You took secrets entrusted to you by the American people, and you gave them to the media to damage a political opponent. That isn't oversight. That is betrayal. Bongino does not let up. The revelation about the spouse's phone tradecraft has sucked the air out of the room, leaving the senators stunned by the sheer calculated nature of the deception. But Bongino knows that isolated incidents can be dismissed as anomalies. To truly nail the case down, to make it historically irrefutable, he needs to show the pattern. He needs to show that this wasn't just a rogue staffer acting once, but a systematic operation that ran for years. He reaches into his folder and pulls out a document that looks different from the others. It isn't a text transcript, it is a data visualization. It is an FBI analysis of leak patterns, a graph with sharp spikes and clear trend lines. Senator, before you claim that this was just one overzealous staffer, let me show you the math, Bongino says, his voice clinically cold. The FBI didn't just investigate specific leaks. They used data analytics to track the flow of classified information from this committee to the press over a 2-year period, from January 2017 through December 2018. He holds the chart up. The red lines on the graph correspond to classified briefings. The black lines correspond to front-page news stories containing details from those briefings. The lines move in perfect synchronization, like a heartbeat. The Bureau tracked every classified briefing attended by Ranking Member Schiff. They then tracked every news story containing details from those briefings. Do you know what they found? Bongino pauses, letting the question hang in the air. They found a 93% correlation. 93%. He sets the chart down with a thud. That means that in 93% of the cases where you received a classified briefing on Russia, a story containing details from that briefing appeared in the press within 4 to 7 days. That is not a coincidence, Senator. That is not random chance. That is a pipeline. That is a dedicated supply chain of secrets flowing from your desk directly to the newsstands. Bongino leans forward, resting his knuckles on the table. In intelligence work, we call that a signature. It's like a fingerprint. When one person is the common denominator in 93% of the leaks, there is no other suspect. Schiff's face is rigid. He knows he cannot argue with the math. He tries to deflect, his voice tight. This is circumstantial speculation. You are drawing lines where none exist to fit a partisan narrative. Speculation, Bongino counters instantly. Is it speculation when the director of the CIA says you are a security risk? This is the hammer blow. The room goes quiet again. The senators know who he is talking about. Mike Pompeo, Bongino says the name clearly. He was the CIA director during this time. He was the man responsible for America's secrets. And he went on the record, publicly, about you. Bongino picks up a transcript of an interview Mike Pompeo gave after leaving office. Let me read his exact words. Quote, Adam Schiff lied to the American people. And during my time as CIA Director and Secretary of State, I know that he leaked classified information that had been provided to him. Bongino looks up, making eye contact with the cameras. He didn't say he suspected you leaked. He said, I know. And then he said this. Bongino reads the next part slowly, emphasizing every syllable. Quote, when we provided information to him and to his staff, it ended up in places it shouldn't have been with alarming regularity. It got so bad that we had to withhold intelligence from the House Intelligence Committee chairman because he couldn't be trusted. Bongino drops the paper onto the table. It slides across the mahogany surface, stopping just inches from Schiff's hands. Think about that, senators, Bongino says, addressing the committee. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency had to stop sharing secrets with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. The system of oversight broke down. Why? Not because of Trump, not because of Russia, but because Adam Schiff couldn't stop leaking to the press. You weakened this country, Bongino accuses, his voice rising in intensity. You blinded the Oversight Committee because the intelligence community knew that telling you a secret was the same as publishing it in the New York Times. You prioritized your personal war against Donald Trump over the national security of the United States. Schiff's face flushes a deep, angry red. That is a politically motivated lie. Director Pompeo served Donald Trump. His attacks on me were retaliation for my effective oversight. Effective oversight? Bongino laughs, a harsh sound. Is that what you call lying about evidence for 3 years? Is that what you call a 93% leak rate? Senator, Mike Pompeo wasn't attacking you politically. He was protecting his officers. He was protecting sources and methods. He knew that if he told you the name of a source in Moscow, that source might be dead in a week because you'd leak it to score a political point. Bongino steps back from the table, shaking his head in disgust. So we have the FBI investigation showing the pattern. We have the phone records showing the spouse phone tradecraft. We have the whistleblower testifying that you directed the operation. And we have the CIA director confirming you leaked with alarming regularity. The evidence is overwhelming, Senator. In any other courtroom in America, this is an open and shut case. He pauses, his expression darkening. But we aren't in a courtroom, are we? And you aren't in handcuffs. And that brings us to the only reason you are sitting in that comfortable chair right now, instead of a defendant's table. The atmosphere in the room shifts. The discussion of leaks, phone records, and statistics fades away. Bongino is moving toward the endgame. He is moving toward the one thing that separates Adam Schiff from every other citizen who has ever broken the law: his protection. Senator, why did you need a pardon? The question is simple, direct. It cuts through the complexity of the previous hour like a razor. President Biden pardoned you on January 20th, 2025, Bongino says, his last day in office, 11 months ago. It was a preemptive pardon. It covered any and all crimes you may have committed related to the Russia investigation and the handling of classified information. Bongino walks around the witness table, prowling the floor. Why? What were you afraid of? Schiff says nothing. His mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. If you didn't leak classified information, as you claim, Bongino presses, why did you need a pardon for leaking classified information? If you didn't lie to the FBI, why did you need a pardon for making false statements? If you didn't abuse your power, why did you need a pardon for official misconduct? The room is dead silent. The logic is inescapable. Innocent men don't need pardons, Senator, Bongino says softly. People who did nothing wrong don't need preemptive protection from prosecution. You don't ask for a pardon unless you know that you committed a crime and you are terrified of getting caught. Bongino picks up the text of the pardon statement. I have the statement from the Biden White House right here. It's full of legal gymnastics. Quote, the issuance of these pardons should not be mistaken as an acknowledgement that any individual engaged in any wrongdoing. Unquote. Bongino scoffs, tossing the paper aside. That is lawyer speak for, we are saving his skin, but we don't want to admit why. It is a legal fiction. Everyone in this room knows what that pardon means. It means guilty. It means you knew the clock was ticking. You knew that eventually a new administration would come in. You knew that eventually Someone like Kash Patel would become FBI director. And you knew that eventually, these files, the 302s, the leak analysis, the whistleblower testimony, would be declassified. Bongino leans in close, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper that is somehow louder than a shout. "You knew I was coming, didn't you?" Schiff flinches. It is a small movement, barely a twitch of the eye, but Bongino sees it. "You knew that once the files were open, your oversight defense would crumble. You knew that without the wall of classification to hide behind, you would be exposed as a fraud. So you begged for that pardon. You cashed in every political favor you had. You made sure that no matter what I found in the archives, you wouldn't go to prison." Bongino straightens up, addressing the Republican senators. "Senators, this is the two-tiered system of justice we talk about. A Marine who mishandles a classified email goes to the brig. A grandmother who walks through the Capitol on January 6th goes to federal prison. But a United States senator who systematically leaks top-secret intelligence to manufacture a coup? He gets a pardon. He gets a book deal. He gets to keep his committee assignments." He turns back to Schiff. "But here is the thing about pardons, Senator. They protect your body, but they don't protect your reputation. They keep you out of jail, but they don't keep you from the judgment of history. A pardon doesn't erase the facts. It just confirms them." "By accepting that pardon," Bongino declares, pointing a finger at Schiff, "you admitted your guilt. You confessed to the world that you are a leaker and a liar. Because if you were innocent, you would have welcomed an investigation. You would have said, 'Open the files. I have nothing to hide.' But you didn't do that. You hid. You ran for cover behind the president's signature." Schiff's hands are shaking now. He clasps them together on the table, trying to steady them, but he cannot stop the tremors. He looks like a man who realizes his armor has fallen off. "I'll tell you what I think happened," Bongino says, delivering his final psychological deconstruction. "I think you knew from day one that there was no real evidence of collusion. You knew the Steele dossier was garbage. You knew the FBI investigation was falling apart. But you also knew that if you admitted that, if you told the truth, your political career was over. You had built your entire brand on being the anti-Trump. You were the captain of the resistance. If it turned out there was nothing there, you were just another failed politician." "So you doubled down," Bongino says. "You lied. You leaked. You destroyed the credibility of this committee. And when the walls started closing in, you grabbed that pardon like a life raft." Bongino gathers the documents, the leak analysis, the phone records, the pardon statement, and stacks them neatly. "You're safe from prison, Senator. Congratulations. The system worked for you. But you are not safe from the truth. Not anymore. The files are out. The 93% correlation is public. The whistleblower is vindicated. And that pardon? That isn't a badge of honor. It's a scarlet letter. It will hang around your neck for the rest of your life. Every time you speak about the rule of law, people will remember that you needed a pardon to escape it." Bongino stops pacing. The energy in the room shifts from the frenetic pace of an interrogation to the solemn weight of a closing statement. He moves back behind the witness table, but he doesn't sit down. He stands there, centered, his hands resting on the back of the empty chair. He looks less like a federal bureaucrat now, and more like the man he was 20 years ago. A street cop about to deliver the bad news to a family who lost everything. "Senator Schiff," Bongino begins, his voice dropping to a register that commands absolute silence. We've talked about statutes and leaks and pardons, but I want to talk about consequences. Real consequences. Not the kind that happen in hearing rooms, but the kind that happen at kitchen tables. He takes a breath, looking past Schiff, looking at the American flag standing in the corner. I grew up in Queens. My dad was a truck driver. My mom worked at a store. We didn't have much money. We didn't have connections. But we had something that you people in Washington seem to have forgotten. We had trust. We trusted our institutions. We believed that if you worked hard, played by the rules, and loved your country, the system would treat you fairly. Bongino looks back at the committee, his eyes scanning the faces of the senators. I became a cop because I believed in that system. NYPD, 81st Precinct, some of the toughest streets in Brooklyn. I saw what happens when people lose faith in the law. I saw what happens when a community starts to believe the system is rigged against them. Chaos follows. Violence follows. His voice hardens. You created that, Senator. You and people like you. You took Americans' trust in their institutions, faith that took 200 years to build, and you shattered it. And for what? For a temporary political advantage? Because you thought Hillary Clinton was entitled to the presidency? Schiff starts to open his mouth, perhaps to object to the lecture, but Bongino raises a hand. I am not finished. I joined the Secret Service in 1999, Bongino continues. I spent 12 years protecting presidents. I protected George W. Bush. I protected Barack Obama. And let me tell you something about that job, Senator. When you put on that suit and that earpiece, politics dies. It doesn't matter if you voted for the man. It doesn't matter if you agree with his policies. My job, my sacred oath, was to take a bullet for him. He leans forward, his expression intense. I stood next to President Obama in Prague, in Jakarta, in Afghanistan, some of the most dangerous places on earth. I watched his back while he shook hands with crowds. If a gunman had stepped out, I would have died for him without hesitation. That is what public service means. It means sacrificing yourself for the institution, for the office, for the country. And then, Bongino says, his voice rising, I watched you. I watched you spend 3 years calling President Trump a traitor. I watched you claim he was a Russian agent. I watched you tell the world you had seen evidence of collusion. And I thought to myself, no way the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee would lie about something that serious. I thought the system had checks and balances. I thought, he sees the intel. He must know something. He laughs bitterly, shaking his head. But no one stopped you. You went on MSNBC and CNN and ABC, and you told the same lies over and over again. And the media ate it up because they hated Trump as much as you did. So they gave you a platform to poison the country. Bongino walks closer to Schiff's seat, stopping just outside the personal space buffer. Do you know what you did to my family, Senator? My cousin, a guy I grew up with? He won't talk to me anymore. He thinks I'm a traitor because I defended Trump. He thinks I betrayed the country because I said the Russia collusion story smelled wrong. Bongino's voice cracks slightly with genuine emotion. My cousin was a firefighter. September 11th, 2001. He was at the towers. He lost friends that day. He is the most patriotic man I know. And you made him think his own cousin was defending a Russian asset. That is what your lies did. They didn't just hurt Trump. They hurt millions of Americans who trusted you. You turned brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, all based on a lie you fabricated in this very room. He steps back, composing himself. When I left the Secret Service, I became a commentator. I had a podcast. I had opinions, strong ones. Sometimes I was right. Sometimes I was wrong. And yeah, sometimes I speculated about things that turned out to be incorrect. He looks at the committee members. But here is the difference between you and me, Senator. When I was wrong, I admitted it. Remember when we arrested the January 6th pipe bomber last month? Sean Hannity played a clip of me on his show, a clip from my podcast days where I speculated it might be an inside job. You know what I said? I looked into the camera and I said, I was paid for opinions then. I'm paid for facts now. I owned my mistake on national television in front of millions of people. He turns back to Schiff, his eyes blazing. You haven't owned anything. You have never apologized. You have never admitted you were wrong. You have never acknowledged that you spent 3 years lying to America about having evidence of collusion. Why is that, Senator? Is it because admitting you lied would destroy what is left of your credibility? Is it because your entire political identity is built on being the hero who stood up to Trump? Schiff's hands are shaking violently now. He keeps them clasped on the table, white-knuckled. Or is it because you can't admit it? Bongino asks softly. Because admitting you lied about the evidence means admitting you lied about everything else. The leaks, the FISA abuse, the classified briefings, all of it. Bongino pulls out one last document. It is the Biden pardon statement again. President Biden gave you a pardon because he knew you were guilty. He knew that if these files ever saw the light of day, you would be finished. But the pardon only keeps you out of prison, Senator. It doesn't keep you from the truth. Bongino gathers the reports, the IG report, the Durham report, the leak analysis, and places them back in his folder. He closes it with a finality that echoes in the room. And that brings us to the last question, the only question that really matters. He looks at Schiff. Senator, you said you saw the evidence. You said it over 100 times. You told America their president was a Russian agent. You destroyed families. You poisoned our politics. You damaged this country in ways we may never fully recover from. His voice is quiet now, calm, final. So, one more time. For the record. For the American people. For history. He pauses, letting the moment stretch until it is almost unbearable. Where was the evidence? Silence. Schiff says nothing. He stares down at his papers. He cannot answer. Because there never was an answer. The silence in the Senate hearing room is absolute. It is the sound of a balloon finally deflating after 8 years of pressure. Adam Schiff, the man who once commanded the news cycle with a single tweet, sits frozen, reduced to a small, frightened man in a big chair. Bongino nods slowly, as if he expected exactly this outcome. That's what I thought, he says. He turns to Chairman Warner. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my briefing. I resign as FBI Deputy Director, effective January 1st, 2026. He picks up his folder. He doesn't wait for dismissal. He doesn't wait for a gavel. He simply turns and walks toward the heavy wooden doors. His stride is purposeful. He looks like a man who has just set down a heavy load he has been carrying for a very long time. At the door, he stops. He turns back to Schiff one last time. Senator, you have your pardon. You're not going to prison, but you're not getting away with it either. Because now everyone knows. The files are declassified. The truth is out. He opens the door. And the truth has a funny way of sticking around. The door closes behind him with a soft click. In the hearing room, no one speaks. Republican senators look grimly satisfied. Democrats look shell-shocked. And Adam Schiff sits at his desk, staring at the empty space where Dan Bongino had been standing. For 8 years, he had been the untouchable hero of the resistance. In 1 hour, Dan Bongino had destroyed all of it. The recording of the hearing leaks within 48 hours. Ironically, given the subject matter, it is likely a staffer who leaks it, someone who wants the world to see what happened. It goes viral immediately. Fox News leads with it for 3 straight days. Bongino's bombshell, FBI Deputy Director exposes Schiff. Sean Hannity plays the clips on repeat. Tucker Carlson's replacement devotes an entire hour to reading the FBI 302s on air. Glenn Beck calls it the most devastating congressional testimony since Watergate. Conservative social media explodes. The clip of Bongino asking, "Where was the evidence?" becomes the most shared video in political history. It becomes a meme. Within a week, you see it on T-shirts. You see it on coffee mugs. You see it on bumper stickers. "Where was it?" becomes shorthand for every political lie, every broken promise, every time a politician claims to have secret knowledge they cannot share. The liberal media attempts to circle the wagons. MSNBC brings on legal experts who explain that the whistleblower was discredited, ignoring the FBI documents that corroborate him. CNN runs segments about the dangerous precedent of declassifying internal documents. The New York Times writes a scolding editorial about how the hearing was a troubling display of partisan revenge. But the defense rings hollow. It fails because Bongino didn't just make accusations, he showed the receipts. The FBI 302s are public now. Anyone with an internet connection can read the leak analysis. Anyone can see the 93% correlation. And once people see the math, the narrative collapses. Schiff's office issues a statement calling the hearing defamatory and politically motivated, but no one cares. The polls come next. Schiff's favorability numbers in California drop 15 points in 2 weeks. Even within his own party, his support erodes. He has become radioactive. He isn't the hero anymore. He is the liability. By mid-January, political analysts are openly speculating that Schiff won't run for re-election in 2030. His brand is toxic. Meanwhile, Dan Bongino walks away from the FBI on January 1st, 2026, exactly as he promised. There is no farewell party. There is no gold watch. He just turns in his badge and credentials at the front desk and drives away from the J. Edgar Hoover building for the last time. 4 days later, on January 5th, he is back where he belongs. The scene is familiar to millions. The home studio, the microphone, the American flag in the background. But something is different. The man behind the mic looks lighter. He looks like a man who has won a war. "This is the Dan Bongino Show," he says, his voice booming with that familiar energy. "And boy, do we have a story for you today." The subscriber count has exploded during his 8-month hiatus. Everyone wants to hear the inside story. Everyone wants to know what it felt like to look Adam Schiff in the eye and drop the hammer. "So, I spent the last 8 months as FBI Deputy Director," Bongino begins. "Some of you thought I sold out. Some of you thought I went to the dark side. I get it. I was skeptical too." He laughs, leaning back in his chair. "But I went because I wanted to see if we could fix things. I wanted to see if the truth still mattered. And you know what I found? The FBI isn't the problem. The agents are good people. The problem is the politicians who weaponize the Bureau against you." He holds up a piece of paper to the camera. It is his resignation letter. "At the bottom of my resignation letter, I wrote a P.S., just for me. Something I knew I'd remember when this was all over. He reads it aloud, a smile playing on his lips. P.S. Senator Schiff, you said you saw the evidence. Where was it? Bongino looks directly into the lens, speaking to the millions of Americans watching, and perhaps to one senator hiding in his office. Folks, the evidence was never there. It was a lie. It was a hoax. It was a partisan witch hunt designed to take down a president because the wrong person won the election. They tore the country apart. They turned us against each other. And they did it all while hiding behind classified information. He leans forward, his face filling the screen. But we got them. We got the receipts. We declassified the files. And now, history knows the truth. Adam Schiff has his pardon. He can stay out of jail. But he can't hide from the fact that he is the biggest liar in the history of the United States Congress. I spent 8 months at the FBI. I solved a cold case. I exposed the corruption. And I asked the question that needed asking. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. He adjusts his headphones, ready to start the show for real. Now, let's talk about the future. Because the truth is out, and there is no putting it back in the bottle. Senator Schiff, if you're watching this, and I know you are, I have one last thing to say to you. The next time you tell the American people you have a secret, we aren't going to believe you. We are going to ask you to show your work, because we have the receipts now. Bongino cues the music. The show begins. The swamp has taken a hit it will never recover from, and Dan Bongino is just getting started.